Welcome to our study tonight. Before we begin, let me just give you a little heads up. I did an internet program tonight on Larry Ragland's The Big Picture. I did it this morning. It'll be airing Thursday at 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. So make sure you tune in for that. All right, let me give you a little bit in the news tonight, talking about prophecy and New World Order and the things that we've been seeing. As we go through this is a new book that I like to really suggest that you read. It's called Superclass. It's by David Rothkopf, The Global Power Elite and the World That They Are Making. Taking us from the corporate boardrooms of America's most powerful companies to dinner meetings at Russia's most notorious oligarchs, he gives us an outline of who these people are and what they're doing. He tells us that, and it's pretty interesting, of the 7 billion people on the planet, probably about 6,000 are what would be called global elites with power and money. And these are the ones that run our governments, our largest corporations, the powerhouse of international finance, the media, world religions, and from the shadows, the world's most dangerous criminal and terrorist organizations. They are the global superclass, and they are shaping the history of our time. Today's superclass has achieved unprecedented levels of wealth and power, and they're using it and wielding it to control actually everyone, or try to control everyone in the world. So it's a good book. If you want, you may want to pick it up. Let's go a little bit further. Some of you know this if you had AT&T. Last Thursday, you were shut down for about 2 hours. So what would we do if suddenly we couldn't use the internet or our phones any longer? For a lot of people, such a scenario would be unthinkable. In fact, it felt like the world was ending for many AT&T customers last week. The disruption to AT&T's network only lasted a few hours, but it created quite a frenzy. So if we're going to see this much panic for an outage that happens for just a few hours, what would our society look like if internet and phone communications were down by days, weeks, or months? So the FBI launched an inquiry into what happened, and they told us it was about some SIM cards. But I did a lot of research, and I found out that pharmacies all over the United States were also having major problems at the same time on Thursday due to what I believe was a cyber attack against one of the biggest healthcare technology companies in the nation. So the FBI says no, it was a SIM card, but I believe it was a test by probably China or maybe even Russia because, and I shared this this morning, we are no longer the world's superpower when it comes to nations. And let me tell you why. Armament-wise, missile-wise, tank-wise, and military equipment-wise, yes, we are. But that's not going to be the New World War. The New World War will have nothing to do with those type of arms. That's old school. It will be cyber attacks. And if they could shut us down, imagine if an EMP comes, or maybe that balloon that came from China, who has capabilities of cyber attacks much better than us, so does Russia. If that happens, we would be shut down. You wouldn't be able to use your phone. You wouldn't be able to have any type of commerce. Wall Street would shut down. Your bank would shut down. So I kind of gave a small list of what you probably would need to do. Now again, this is a worst case scenario, but again, most of us are taken aback only after some crisis happens. So it would be a good idea to have cash on hand, because it might be that you won't be able to access any of your bank accounts. And speaking of those, you may want to have paper copies of your important documents, including the numbers of your bank accounts, because again, if everything shuts down, then basically what will happen is you won't be able to access those bank accounts or the ATMs, and so it'd be great. And I hate to say this, but most of us have gotten rid of our landlines. If an EMT comes, or a coronal mass ejection, or some type of cyber attack, landlines will be the only thing you can use. And of course, you should have a radio, only to be able to hear everything in the news that's happening. So those are some of the basics. And again, it may be too precautionary, but you don't know. We don't know. We're in that spot where we are more technologically advanced than ever before, and that's our weakness. For example, the Houthis this last week cut an underground cable. What we don't understand is that we have a lot of satellites, but there's still wiring that takes all of those towers and brings it to us. And so they cut an underground cable in the Red Sea in order to disrupt communication through Asia and yes, even America. So I'm not sure how they're going to get to fix that or what they're going to do to get around it, but we really need to understand that that's happening. We can't put our head in the sands. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on to New World Order. 3 existential threats that could devastate America. And again, I touched on it a little bit. In recent years, there's been one enormous crisis after another. You know that. We live in a time of major wars, global pestilence, and billion-dollar natural disasters. There are several existential threats that we are facing right now, which could potentially result in millions of dead Americans. I wish that I was exaggerating, but I'm not. Throughout human history, great pestilences have killed millions of people many times. Today, our scientists are taking some of the deadliest diseases ever known to humanity and purposely trying to make them more infectious. Here's one example. The U.S. government is spending $1 million of American taxpayer money, yours and mine, to fund experiments on dangerous bird flu viruses in collaboration with the Chinese scientists. I guess we just don't learn. I guess we just want to continue to do it. More infections? Why would they want to make more infections? This type of research really is an existential threat to all of humanity, just like the COVID virus. It's way too easy for an accident to happen, and once a dangerous bug gets out, it can spread around the globe in the blink of an eye, as we have seen. The head of WHO, World Health Organization, is warning that the timing of the next great global outbreak is a matter of when, not if. That's not very comforting to any one of us. Of course, strange diseases are already making headlines all over the globe. It's called the Alaska pox. It hit in late January. It's reported that there's a confirmed case of bubonic plague in Oregon. The second existential threat is, according to 60 Minutes, the number of migrants from China that are crossing our southern border has gotten 50 times higher over the past year, and a very large proportion of them are Chinese males of military age. So what does that mean? Well, is China doing this on purpose? I believe they are, and no one's reporting it. Forget about your social media and forget about your liberal media and all the networks. They're not reporting it. Let me tell you why I think it's happening. Because if China suddenly attacks Taiwan, China will have cells of military-age men in this country already, embedded in our country. Imagine the havoc that they could play. Retired Air Force General Blaine Holt believes this is precisely what's happening. Quote, tens of thousands of military-age men have come across the border and are now in America, organized by group and nationality. Among them are the terrorists and state actors, in particular, members of the People's Liberation Army of China. As we speak, these actors are training, making plans, and obtaining weapons, watching our patterns, and learning our vulnerabilities. We are vulnerable to attack, Holt added. Our enemies eagerly wait. I think about something I saw a long, long time ago. Before December 7th, 1941, there were Japanese soldiers that came to Hawaii and took detailed pictures of all of the carriers out in the harbor of Pearl Harbor. They sent those back, and the raid on Pearl Harbor was predicated by those pictures that came back. How do we not know that's happening right now? And lastly, Russia. They have hypersonic nuclear missiles. They would also strike all other beautiful historical places that have long been included in the flight targets of our nuclear triad. That's their quote. Why won't our leaders take such threats seriously? If a nuclear war happens, most of the United States will not survive. Unfortunately, most of those in the general population don't understand anything that I just said, or they don't really care. They're just going to keep playing around and partying until finally time runs out. Now, why do I tell you these things? Why is the news so horrific? I'm going to be honest with you. I do not watch the news. I watch absolutely no news. I vet all the news that I do for you, and I want the real truth. I don't want a bunch of headline news, which is not headlines, and breaking now, which is not breaking now, because they're looking for ratings. I'm not looking for a rating. I'm looking to give you the news. Why would I give you that news? Because I think two reasons. One is so that we're aware of it. Secondly, and I'm going to be real honest with you, deep down inside me, I get a little excited watching everything fall apart. Why? Because I know that that's a sign of Christ coming. The more it happens, and I'm not crazy about it happening, the closer we are to Jesus. So I'm not a pessimist. I'm not giving you the news because I'm a pessimist or a harbinger of bad news. I want us to be aware. I want us to be much, much more aware than any of the news we get on our media, because they're not feeding you the right news. They're feeding news so that they can get people to listen to them. I'm not. I'm feeding news so we can understand that God is at work and He's about ready to come back. Speaking of that, Jesus said that we would have persecution, that they would hate us, Christians, like they hated Him in the last days. This comes from this week. Dramatic rise in church attacks. This one blew me away. 80% increase in just the last 5 years. If you believe anti-Christian attacks have skyrocketed over the last decade, you're right. Attacks on churches have increased 800% in less than 5 years. including attempted bombings, shootings, satanic vandalism, numerous attacks based on anti-Christian bias due to support for abortion or extreme transgender ideology. There are a lot of them that are doing the attacks. The report identified 915 acts of hostility against churches between January 2020 and 23, just 3 years. 709 acts of vandalism, 135 completed or attempted arsons, 32 bomb threats, 22 gun-related incidents, 61 other incidents including assaults, threats, and interruption of worship services. Putin opposition leader, listen to this, just bouncing out of it to tell you a little bit about it. Putin opposition leader was killed this past week, Alexei Navalny. He was put to death, many believe. America's not doing anything. They put 500 sanctions against Russia, which mean nothing. They're tiny little sanctions, it means nothing. Let me tell you what this man was. He was a born-again Christian, and he was professing his faith, and he was a threat to Putin, and he put him to death in jail. The continued persecution goes on. More than double the number of attacks in all of 2022 happened in 2023. 12 instances of satanic graffiti just in 6 months. 75 completed or attempted arsons. 315 acts of vandalism. 10 gun-related incidents. 20 bomb threats. 59 churches faced repeated acts of hostility. And it goes on to tell you these things. A minority where under investigation is hate crimes. Only a minority. Bombings, shootings, Molotov cocktails. Christian churches face potential mass casualties from explosions and shootings in 2023. While some acts of violence seem senseless, others carried a pointed political message. Many church assaults stem from the Christian church's 2,000-year-old teaching that life begins at fertilization and conception, and abortion is murder. And if it wasn't those that were going against us, it was the transgenders. Let me tell you something. This liberal side of our world and of our nation is violent, and the violence is coming against Christians. I was saying today, earlier when I did the broadcast, that first of all comes censure. Censoring is the first thing that goes against Christians in any nation that's persecuting them. The next one is violence, and we're watching it. The Biden administration cannot plead ignorance of church desecrations and vandalism targeting houses of worship. Last May 27th, the Department of Homeland Security issued a bulletin warning, quote, of a heightened threat environment for churches and religious institutions. Thanks to the 2024 general election cycle and legislative or judicial decisions pertaining to socio-political issues, such as issues involving LGBTQIA plus community. The Biden administration then opened its faith-based security advisory council. They want to stop it, right? Allegedly to advise houses of worship on how to improve security. Biden's handpicked the FBSAC members included controversial street agitator Al Sharpton. Are you kidding me? LGBTQ activists, and 3 Islamists. He's not trying to help churches. He has nothing to do. President Joe Biden's indifference abroad to the fundamental freedom of religion is rivaled only by the increasing antagonism toward the moral absolutes taught by the Bible-believing churches here in the United States. He is anti-church. I believe he's anti-Jesus. I don't care what denomination he says he is. He practices nothing except allowing our churches and Christianity to take a back seat to all of this violence. So we're living in times where Jesus talked about. Let's go a little bit further and tell you a little bit about our economy. And as I tell you about our economy, shock survey on what Muslims think reveal the future of Europe. This is religion, excuse me. I'm jumping all the way down to religion. This is the French weekly, Le Journal des Dimanches, has published the most comprehensive and detailed survey on what French Muslims think. Not surprisingly, the results are disturbing. 56% of French Muslims hate Jews and want to see them eradicated. France, one of the hearts of the European community, is starting to turn to a Muslim community. They're very, very strong in France, and they're making their way in England and also in Germany. Other figures show that 57% of French Muslims place respect for Islamic Sharia law over the French Republic law. Survey further showed that 49% of French Muslims want Catholics to convert to Islam, and 46% want churches to be transformed into mosques. This is not about having a co-equal or understanding of the Muslim religion. This is about Islam, the Muslim religion, overtaking Christianity. There's at least 751 Muslim gangs living in France. Members of Muslim gangs no longer respect the police. France is a country where more than 70% of prison inmates are Muslim. Throughout France, Jewish men conceal their skull caps under a hat. Jewish women tuck their Star of David necklaces inside their clothing. Many Jewish families no longer place mezuzahs at the entrance to their homes. French Christians, visibly wearing a cross in the streets, receive insults. Every year, dozens of French churches are desecrated and ransacked. French President Emmanuel Macron said in October of 2020 that he wanted to fight what he called Islamic separation and separatism. His statement provoked vehement protests from all over the French Muslim world and organizations and demonstrations in several countries of the Muslim world. Since then, he's totally avoided talking about Islam altogether. France is the country in Europe with the largest number of Muslims, 69% Muslims. 60% of British Muslims would like Sharia law to be established in Great Britain. In Germany, Sharia-controlled zones have begun to appear. They've also been emerging in Belgium, Sweden, and the Netherlands. It's a horde. It's a satanic horde that is sweeping over Europe. And if we don't watch, it's going to sweep America. In 2015, the Algerian writer Bossalam Sensal, in the novel 2084, said, "The end of the world described a totalitarian future in which Muslim extremists establish an oppressive caliphate where freedom of thought and action is abolished." When a television journalist asked him what, in his opinion, France would be like in 2084, his immediate response was, quote, "France will be Islamist. Europe too," he added. What we're seeing could very well mean the end of the European civilization as we know it. Let me give you now, jump back to economy and show you a couple things here. American new cringe going to the grocery store as prices keep rising. We're told over and over again that inflation isn't there, that Bidenomics is working. What lies? I mean, if Biden says anything, anything out of his mouth is a lie. He lies about who his wife is. He doesn't even remember her name. It seems odd to talk about 2021 as the good old days, but the truth is that the cost of living was far lower just 3 short years ago. A Big Mac value meal can cost up to, are you ready for this? $18 in some parts of the country. $18. There's no way I would shell out $18 for a Big Mac meal. Has your income gone up by more than $1,000 a month over the past 3 years? If not, you're falling behind. The average U.S. household, ready for this, is now shelling out an additional $1,019 a month just in purchasing the exact same goods and services that they did 3 years ago. That's close to $14,000 a year extra for the exact same things you got 3 years ago. It has become such a painful experience for a lot of people. Americans are now spending 15% of their disposable incomes on food. Grocery prices already are at absurd levels. On a very popular internet forum, one user recently complained that his grocery bill for the week has now hit $250. I'm quoting. $100, he said, used to be the total when we really stocked up or picked up some extras. Prices now are starting to climb, and we trimmed the extras, but it still hit $130. At $150, we started complaining. A month ago, it hit $180. It may have only been 2 weeks since we hit $180. Just today, I went to the grocery store, he said, and the same things were $250, and we didn't get everything we needed. Let's talk about the price of cocoa for a moment. Yep, global supplies of cocoa have gotten very, very tight. We're being warned that the price of cocoa can reach as high as $10,000 per ton. So if you love chocolate, you should try to hoard as much as you can while prices are still relatively low, because they're going to go through the ceiling. Because chocolate prices are going to accelerate quite rapidly from the point of what I'm telling you this on. Sadly, car insurance rates are going up even faster than food prices are. And the average cost of full coverage car insurance increased by 26% to $2,543 in 2024. Just making it from month to month has become a struggle for tens of millions of Americans. A video in which one young woman complains about how oppressive the cost of living is already being viewed by more than 18 million viewers. Despite liberal media cheerleading and Biden's assurances of a strong economy, Americans are starting to feel the crunch. More money is not the answer. More debt is definitely not the answer. What we need is a productive economy that makes stuff of real value. Getting people to consume as much as possible will not lead to anywhere good, but getting people to produce at a high level will lead to lasting wealth. That's how America got great. We produce things. We no longer produce things. We're no longer creative. Everyone knows that a crash is coming, everyone. And that crash isn't going to create a tremendous amount of chaos throughout our society. It's going to create a tremendous, tremendous amount. It appears that Jeff Bezos understands that things are about to change. I shared it with you last week because he's been selling off tens of millions of dollars of Amazon shares, and he doesn't need the money. Of course, the truth is that very challenging economic times are in our immediate future. Again, why do I tell you that? Because I want you to understand what's happening. I want you to understand what's going on right under our noses. Speaking of money, this article says the next generation is being prepared for the adoption of digital currency. And obviously, that's where all this is going. We know there's going to be a one world economy. We know there's going to be a one world marking system that's tied to buying and selling. And we're on a fast pace for it. We used to think we were. Listen, that was nothing compared to where we are now. Now governments already have the means to track you and to monitor your finances. They can order banks and brokerage firms to freeze your assets. And if you remember what happened in Canada during the Freedom Convoy protests, Justin Castro used his emergency powers to cut the protesters off from the financial system. They had no access to their bank accounts or to their ATMs just for protesting. Imagine that. Imagine if it happens in America. Governments already have the power to do all of these things if they wanted to. But CBDCs take the power to a much higher level because there's no more middleman. Government authorities wouldn't have to bother going to banks or brokerages and credit card companies. They could simply deactivate your funds with a mouse click. Have fun trying to buy your groceries then. Over 100 central banks that are now developing their own CBDCs. It's central bank digital currency. And that includes both the United States and the European Union. They also say that CBDCs will be an effective way to control money laundering, criminal activity, this is how they'll usher it in, and terrorist financing. That's why the EU has already begun to crack down on cash and crypto transactions over £1,000, or euros, excuse me. Hardly anyone seems fazed by the loss of privacy or increased government authority over their lives. Again, most people are asleep. Most people let things happen and they won't react till after they see crisis. But intelligent people clearly see what's going on. Frankly, the brutal use of Prime Minister's emergency powers against the Freedom Convoy protesters in Canada should have sent a giant white wake-up call to all of us. And again, you won't hear this on the media. You're not even going to hear this on Fox. You're not going to hear it anywhere. But this is the reality of what's happening. It means having some savings outside of the financial system is a complete and sensible idea. Unfortunately, there's plenty of easy ways to do this, including liquid assets like physical gold and silver, cryptocurrency and cash. You may say, well, Pastor, I can't afford silver or gold. Of course you can. One silver dollar, which is 1 ounce of silver, is only about $28 right now. So yes, you can afford it. And it's always something that goes up. So it's hard to imagine any downside for having direct access to some emergency savings. Independent thinking people ought to understand where this trend is heading. And more importantly, to take rational steps to minimize the consequences in advance. Lastly tonight, I've been telling you about the eclipse that's coming. And I wanted to give you a couple things first. We are making gigantic strides in astronomy. It was one of my minors in college. And I'm very interested in astronomy. I keep up on astronomical news. NASA has just put up another telescope that way advanced past the Hubble telescope. This telescope is far out in space and it's seeing things that are absolutely unbelievable. Let me give you just a little summation of it. They used to think of the Big Bang Theory, that everything exploded from one central spot, and that if you look backwards in that central spot, which they think they can, that you would see more complex galaxies. Well, they're looking backwards and you see less complex, very basic, because everything blew out. They're looking back and they're seeing more complex galaxies. And so it's confusing cosmologists, those who study origins. But I found this today, and I'm going to go a couple more after this. Astronomers discover a record-breaking star with a black hole that eats a sun, one sun per day, like our sun. It eats it up one a day. Astronomers have discovered a quasar, the brightest of its kind, which is reportedly as bright as 500 trillion suns. Let me repeat it. It's as bright as 500 trillion suns and is powered by a supermassive black hole. We discovered, I'm quoting, the fastest growing black hole known to date. It grows as it sucks light into it. It has a mass of 17 billion suns, and each just over a sun per day. This makes it the most luminous object in the known universe. That is unbelievable. The Bible says in Genesis that the stars are for signs, seasons, and times. And I've been telling you about the eclipse that's coming, the Great American Eclipse, and I want to give you a little bit more knowledge of this. So, how is it possible that such a vast number of coincidences just happened to take place this April 8th of 2024? Well, I already shared that the sun, the moon, and the 7 other planets in our solar system are actually going to line up during this Great American Eclipse on April 8th. But did you know that 7 specific locations that it'll pass, the umbra is the darkest spot, total eclipse. Penumbra goes further out. But the umbra, which is just a swath that will go past our United States from southwest to northeast. So that path is going to go directly over 7 locations that are named Nineveh, which just happens to fall within the path of the Great American Eclipse on April 8th. Let me start by going back almost 7 years. On August 21st, 2017, the first Great American Eclipse made headlines all over the nation. It was also known as the 7 Salem Eclipse because the path of that eclipse crossed over 7 U.S. locations named Salem. Salem, if you know, Salem is short for Jerusalem, and that's why so many early Americans chose that name for their communities. It passed over Salem, Oregon, Salem, Idaho, Salem, Nebraska, Salem, Missouri, Salem, Kentucky, Salem, South Carolina. Now the second Great American Eclipse is almost here, and the path of that eclipse will cross over 7 U.S. locations named Nineveh. Nineveh, Texas, Nineveh, Missouri, Nineveh, Indiana, Nineveh, Ohio, Nineveh, Pennsylvania, Nineveh, Virginia, Nineveh, New York. It'll also cross over a location named Nineveh in the province of Nova Scotia in Canada. So what? Well, if you listen to the documentary I did in Hollywood in 2017 called The Sign, I outlined the fact that when Jonah was sent to Nineveh, not in the United States, Nineveh of old, to warn them and to ask them to repent, there was a total eclipse that came over Nineveh. It was called the Bar Segal eclipse. You can look it up, and it was very well documented by historians. After that eclipse, the whole country repented. They didn't before it. It was a sign to them. I'm getting chills just telling you this. 8 Ninevehs. In some of these locations, residents will be able to view a total solar eclipse. So what do we know about Nineveh? Well, Genesis chapter 10 tells us that Nineveh was built by Nimrod, and I think it's very noteworthy. I spoke again about this in that documentary in 2017. The Assyrian eclipse, also known as the Bar Segal eclipse, is a solar eclipse recorded in Assyrian eponymine history lists, and most likely dates to the 10th year of the reign of King Ashur-dan III. The eclipse is identified with the one that occurred on the 15th of June, 763 BC in the prophetic Julian calendar. The Bar Segal eclipse happened at the same time Jonah was in Nineveh, warning the population that the city would be destroyed. The Bar Segal eclipse occurred over the Assyrian capital of the city of Nineveh in the middle of the reign of Jeroboam II, who ruled Israel from 786 BC to 746 BC. According to 2 Kings 14:25, the prophet Jonah lived and prophesied in Jeroboam's reign. The eclipse took place around when Jonah arrived in Nineveh and urged the people to repent. Otherwise, the city would be destroyed. I actually believe that when Jonah was going away from Nineveh and he was swallowed by a great fish, not a whale, a great fish, I think that was a stall, believe it or not. Jonah was wrong. He had to repent and go back to Nineveh, but the timing brought him back to Nineveh during the solar eclipse. Come on, this is more than coincidence. This would explain the dramatic repentance of the people of Nineveh as described in the book of Jonah. Ancient cultures, including Assyria, viewed eclipses as omens of imminent destruction, and an empire was in chaos at that time, struggling with revolts, famines, 2 separate outbreaks of plagues. Sounds like America. I can understand that the appearance of such an eclipse could have been seen as a strong confirmation of Jonah's message to the people of Nineveh. We don't look at it like that anymore. We just want to go and see it. We don't put any portent against it. But the Bible tells us they're for signs, seasons, and times. Now, a historical solar eclipse of our own planet is near. And it's being reported that the Great American Eclipse of 2024 will be the most viewed astronomical event in all of U.S. history. And listen to this. Interestingly, out of more than 19,000 cities, towns and villages in the United States, the very first community in the U.S. that the path will eclipse will touch Eagle Pass, Texas. Of course, Eagle Pass, Texas has become ground zero of the national immigration crisis. Eagle Pass, which is home to 28,500 Texans, has become the ground zero of our wide political fight. The issue has become exacerbated under Joe Biden, and the southern border has witnessed a record of at least 6.3 million migrants crossing since he took out office. Just another coincidence? Oh yeah. One more thing. The upcoming month of April this year, in late April, billions of 13-year cicadas and billions of 17-year cicadas will start emerging from the ground for the first time since Thomas Jefferson was president. These are locusts. They come every 13 years and every 17 years. This spring, April, 2 different broods of cicada locusts, one that lives in the 13-year cycle and one that lives in a 17-year cycle, will emerge at the same time from underground in a rare synchronized event that last happened in 1803. Billions of the winged insects will make an appearance across the Midwest and the Southeast, beginning in some places in late April. For a raucous mating ritual that tends to inspire fascination and annoyance in equal measure, they will devastate any crops. This year's dual emergence, you ready, is a once-in-a-lifetime event. While any given 13-year bond and 17-year broods can occasionally emerge at the same time, each specific pair will see their cycles aligned once every 221 years. So, group known as Brood 13 and Brood 14 make their homes adjacent to one another with an overlap. You ready for where it is? In central Illinois, it has a central Illinois overlap. Why is that so important? Well, the Great American Eclipse of 2017 and the path of the Great Eclipse of 2024 just happen to intersect in the same spot in Illinois. A giant X over America is being formed by the paths of those 2 eclipses, and that giant X will finally be completed on April 8th. And let me give you one more coincidence. The X will appear on a small city called Egypt, where there are pyramids that are there. Not like in Egypt, but it's an American city named Egypt. Is this just coincidental? I don't think so. I believe that what we'll witness on April 8th is a sign and a warning for the entire nation. I said it in the documentary in 2017. When everybody else is saying, well, this is nuclear war, it means this, it means I said, no, we don't know what it means. It's a sign. God is giving us a sign. Just like the city of Nineveh in the ancient world, we are being given an opportunity to change direction. Will we take advantage of that opportunity, or will we ignore it? God loves us, and he wants to give that opportunity. So, again, imagine that location in Texas that it's coming over is called Jonah. By the way, there's something else happening on April 10th, 2 days later. Very, very rare. And again, these are more than just coincidences. In addition to our planet, 7 other recognized planets in our solar system will line up in a straight line. So on April 8th, the sun, the moon, and all the other planets in our solar system will line up in a straight line in the sky when looking at it from Jerusalem towards the east. This happens only once, very, very rarely. Are you ready for how often it happens? Every 32 million years. If God's not speaking to us, I don't know who is.